Eleanor Grayson sat in her favorite armchair, the one with the faded floral pattern that had cradled her through decades of triumphs and heartaches. At 78, her hands were steady, her mind sharp as ever, though the world seemed increasingly eager to dismiss her. The glow of her laptop screen cast a soft light across her living room, filled with bookshelves and mementos of a life well lived, a framed photo of her late husband, Thomas, a stack of financial journals, and a small jade figurine from her travels in Asia. She scrolled through Facebook, a platform she joined reluctantly at her granddaughter's urging, hoping to stay connected to her sprawling family. But tonight, the screen felt like a battlefield. It started with a post from her nephew, Carl, a brash 40-something who fancied himself a financial guru. He'd shared a meme about boomers hoarding wealth, with a snarky caption, "Aunt Ellie's probably still got her millions tucked under her mattress. Too senile to know what to do with it." The comments were worse. Her own flesh and blood cousins, nieces, even her younger sister, Margaret, piled on with laughing emojis and quips about her outdated ways. "She probably still uses a flip phone," one wrote. "Bet she forgot where she parked her fortune," another chimed in. Eleanor's chest tightened, not from sadness, but from a slow-burning anger. Senile. Her. The woman who'd built a $12 million portfolio from scratch, starting with a modest inheritance and a knack for numbers. The woman who'd outsmarted Wall Street brokers in the 80s, navigated the dot-com crash, and diversified her investments with a precision that left her financial advisor in awe. She leaned back, her silver hair catching the lamplight, and let the sting of their words settle. They didn't know her. They never had. She'd always been the quiet one in the family, the observer. Born in a small Ohio town, Eleanor had grown up in the shadow of louder siblings and cousins, her intelligence overlooked because she preferred books to banter. After marrying Thomas, a kind-hearted engineer, they'd built a life together, childless but rich in love and ambition. When he passed 10 years ago, she'd thrown herself into her investments, not out of greed, but as a way to keep her mind alive, to honor the dreams they'd shared. Every stock pick, every bond purchase, was a conversation with him, a way to keep him close. But her family saw none of that. To them, she was just Aunt Ellie, the eccentric widow with too much money and not enough sense. She'd overheard their whispers at reunions, "She's getting old, probably slipping," and now, here it was, splashed across Facebook for all to see. She closed her laptop, her lips pressed into a thin line. The room was silent, save for the faint tick of the grandfather clock. She didn't need their approval, but she wasn't going to let their disrespect slide either. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She brewed her coffee, strong and black, and sat at her mahogany desk, where she kept her financial records. She pulled up her portfolio, a digital empire she'd nurtured for decades: tech stocks, real estate holdings, municipal bonds, and a few speculative ventures that had paid off handsomely. Her net worth sat at $12.3 million, a number that still surprised her sometimes. She wasn't flashy. She drove a 15-year-old Volvo and wore sweaters she'd knitted herself, but she knew the power of money, not for what it could buy, but for what it could prove. She dialed her financial advisor, Robert, a meticulous man in his 50s who'd worked with her for years. "I want to liquidate everything," she said, her voice steady. Robert paused, then laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Eleanor, you're sitting on a gold mine. Why on earth?" "I'm not asking, Robert," she cut in. "I want it all in cash, or as close as you can get. And I need it done quickly." He tried to reason with her, citing market trends and tax implications. But she was resolute. "I know what I'm doing," she said. "Just make it happen." By noon, she'd contacted her lawyer, Susan, to update her will. Susan, a sharp woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, raised an eyebrow when Eleanor outlined her plan. "You're sure about this?" she asked, adjusting her glasses. "This is drastic." Eleanor nodded, her eyes gleaming with purpose. "I've never been surer." As the day wore on, Eleanor felt a weight lifting. She wasn't just reacting to her family's cruelty. She was reclaiming her story. They'd called her senile, mocked her as if she were a relic. Fine. She'd show them what a senile woman could do. She'd spent decades building something extraordinary, not for their sake, but for her own. And now, she'd use it to draw a line in the sand. That evening, she reopened her laptop and typed a single post on Facebook. Her fingers steady on the keys. "To my family, I've seen your comments. I've heard your whispers. You think I'm too old to know my own mind. You're wrong. I've made my decisions, and you'll see them soon enough. Goodbye." She hit post, then logged off. The silence in her house felt like a victory. Eleanor spent the next week in a flurry of activity, her mind buzzing with the kind of focus she hadn't tapped into since her early days as an investor. She wasn't impulsive, never had been, but this was different. This was a reckoning. The liquidation of her portfolio was no small feat. Robert called daily with updates, his voice tinged with worry as he processed the sale of her assets. Tech stocks were offloaded at a peak, bonds cashed out with minimal loss, and her real estate holdings, a rental property in Chicago and a vacation home in Maine, were put on the market. By the end of the week, her accounts held a staggering $11.8 million in liquid funds, after taxes and fees. She didn't touch the money yet. Instead, she let it sit, a silent force waiting for her next move. Her house, a modest two-story in a quiet Columbus suburb, became her command center. She spread out financial statements, legal documents, and a notebook where she jotted down her thoughts. The process was cathartic, like shedding an old skin. She wasn't just dismantling her portfolio. She was dismantling the assumptions her family had made about her. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from relatives. Carl sent a half-hearted apology. "Aunt Ellie, it was just a joke. Don't take it so seriously." Margaret, her sister, left a voicemail, her tone equal parts guilt and defensiveness. "Eleanor, what's this about decisions? You're not doing anything rash, are you?" Her niece, Sarah, posted a vague comment on her wall. "Family sticks together. Right." Eleanor ignored them all. She'd spent too long being the accommodating aunt, the one who sent birthday checks and hosted holiday dinners, only to be reduced to a punchline. No more. She met with Susan again to finalize her new will. The original had been generous, dividing her estate among her siblings, nieces, nephews, and a few charities. Now, she rewrote it entirely. "I want the bulk of my estate to go to organizations that empower women," she told Susan. "Scholarships, mentorship programs, shelters, places that help women stand on their own." Susan nodded, scribbling notes. "And the family?" she asked cautiously. Eleanor's smile was tight. "They'll get something, just enough to make them think." She allocated small, symbolic sums to her relatives, $10,000 each. Enough to sting, but not enough to matter. The rest, millions of dollars, would fund programs for young women in STEM, for single mothers escaping abuse, for elderly women living alone. She thought of her younger self, the girl who'd been told she couldn't handle numbers because she was too delicate. She thought of Thomas, who'd believed in her when no one else did. This was her legacy, not a pile of cash for ungrateful heirs. As the days passed, Eleanor felt a shift within her. The anger that had sparked her decision was giving way to something deeper, a sense of purpose. She wasn't just cutting her family off. She was building something new. She researched organizations, made calls, and even met with a local nonprofit director who cried when Eleanor pledged $2 million to their women's education fund. "You're changing lives," the director said, her voice trembling. Eleanor waved it off. But inside, she felt a warmth she hadn't known in years. Still, the family's reactions gnawed at her. She wasn't heartless. She'd loved them, flawed as they were. But love didn't mean tolerating disrespect. She remembered a conversation with Thomas years ago, when they'd faced a similar betrayal from a business partner. "You don't owe anyone your loyalty if they don't earn it," he'd said. She'd lived by that ever since. One evening, she sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Her neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, waved from across the street. At 82, Mrs. Callahan was a kindred spirit, another widow who refused to be defined by age. "Heard you're stirring up trouble," she called, grinning. Eleanor laughed. The sound light and free. "Just rewriting the story," she replied. By the 10th day, her plan was in motion. The money was secure, the will finalized, and her family's messages had tapered off, replaced by a nervous silence. They knew something was coming, but they didn't know what. Eleanor didn't care. She was done explaining herself. She poured a glass of wine, sat at her desk, and opened her laptop. Not to check Facebook, but to draft a letter to the organizations she'd chosen. It was time to make her mark. Not as Aunt Ellie, but as Eleanor Grayson, a woman who'd built an empire and wasn't afraid to wield it. The news broke on a crisp Saturday morning, carried by a single email from Susan to the family. Eleanor had instructed her lawyer to be direct. The estate had been restructured, and they were no longer the primary beneficiaries. The email included a brief note from Eleanor herself. "I've spent my life building something meaningful. I will not let it be mocked. My wealth will go to those who value progress over gossip. You'll receive your share, but don't expect more." She debated softening the words, but in the end, she let them stand. They were true. The fallout was immediate. Her phone lit up with calls and texts, a chorus of outrage and confusion. Carl was the loudest, leaving a voicemail that dripped with entitlement. "Aunt Ellie, this is insane. You can't just cut us out like this." Margaret sent a long, rambling message about family loyalty, conveniently ignoring her own role in the Facebook fiasco. Sarah, the niece who'd once been closest to Eleanor, wrote a single line, "I thought you loved us." That one stung, but Eleanor pushed it aside. Love didn't mean blindness. She didn't respond. Instead, she drove to a local coffee shop, a cozy place with exposed brick walls and the scent of fresh pastries. She ordered a latte and sat by the window, watching people pass by on couples, harried parents, an elderly man with a cane. She wondered about their stories, their struggles. Her money could help them, not just her family's greed. The thought steadied her. Back home, she found a letter in her mailbox, handwritten and unexpected. It was from her cousin, David, the quiet one who'd never joined the Facebook pile-on. At 65, he was the closest in age to her, a retired teacher who'd always treated her with respect. "Eleanor," he wrote, "I don't know what's happened, but I'm sorry if I've ever made you feel less than you are. You've always been the smartest person I know. If you need to talk, I'm here." She read it twice, her throat tight. Not everyone had betrayed her. She tucked the letter into a drawer, promising herself to call him later. The next day, she met with the director of a women's shelter in Columbus. The director, a woman named Linda with kind eyes and a firm handshake, walked her through their programs: job training, counseling, child care for single mothers. Eleanor listened, her heart swelling as Linda described women who'd rebuilt their lives from nothing. "Your donation will save lives," Linda said, showing her a room where children played while their mothers attended classes. Eleanor nodded, her resolve hardening. This was why she'd done it. But the family's anger didn't fade. Carl showed up unannounced that evening, his face red with indignation. "You're throwing away our inheritance," he shouted, pacing her living room. Eleanor stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. "It's not your inheritance, Carl. It's my life's work, and I decide where it goes." He stormed out, slamming the door, but his words lingered. She sat alone, wondering if she'd been too harsh. Then she remembered the meme, the laughter, the word senile. No, she thought. She'd done the right thing. By the end of the week, the family had split into factions: those who raged, those who pleaded, and those who stayed silent. Eleanor focused on the future. She signed contracts with 3 more organizations, allocating $5 million in total. Each meeting left her lighter, as if she were shedding the weight of her family's expectations. She wasn't just giving away money. She was giving away power, the kind that came from knowing she'd made a difference. As she lay in bed that night, the house quiet around her, Eleanor felt a flicker of doubt. Had she been too ruthless? Would Thomas have approved? She closed her eyes, picturing his warm smile. "Do what's right, Ellie," he'd always said. And this felt right. She wasn't punishing her family. She was protecting her legacy. Tomorrow, she'd keep going, because there was still work to do. Eleanor's days took on a rhythm, a blend of purpose and reflection. She woke early, brewed her coffee, and spent mornings reviewing proposals from nonprofits. Her dining table, once a place for family gatherings, was now covered with spreadsheets and brochures. She'd pledged another $3 million, this time to a national scholarship fund for women in engineering. The fund's director, a young woman named Priya, reminded Eleanor of herself at 30, determined, underestimated, and fiercely intelligent. "You're giving these girls a chance to change the world," Priya said during a video call. Eleanor smiled, her heart full. "I just want them to know they can." Her family's outrage had quieted, replaced by a tense stalemate. A few, like Sarah, sent tentative messages, probing for reconciliation. "Can we talk? Aunt Ellie, I didn't mean to hurt you." Eleanor wasn't ready to respond. Not yet. She needed time to let the wound heal, to focus on the path she'd chosen. But David's letter stayed with her, a reminder that not all bridges were burned. She called him one afternoon, and his warm, familiar voice brought tears to her eyes. "I'm proud of you, Eleanor," he said. "You're doing something big." She thanked him, promising to visit soon. The community began to notice her work. A local newspaper ran a story about her donations, calling her Columbus's quiet philanthropist. Eleanor cringed at the attention. She'd never been one for the spotlight, but the article brought more organizations to her door. She vetted each one carefully, ensuring her money would be used wisely. She wasn't naive. She knew wealth could attract vultures. But she also knew how to spot sincerity. And she found it in the eyes of the people she met: directors, volunteers, women whose lives had been transformed by the programs she funded. One afternoon, she visited a community center where her donation had funded a new computer lab. A group of teenage girls, part of a coding boot camp, showed her their project's simple apps and websites, but brimming with potential. One girl, a shy 16-year-old named Aisha, thanked her quietly. I want to be an engineer, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Because of you, I might actually get there. Eleanor's throat tightened. She saw herself in Aisha, the girl who'd been told she didn't belong in a man's world. You will, she said, squeezing the girl's hand. You absolutely will. The encounter stayed with her, a beacon through the darker moments. Because there were dark moments. Late at night, when the house was too quiet, Eleanor wondered if she'd been too unforgiving. Her family wasn't evil, just thoughtless, caught up in their own lives. She thought of Sarah's wide-eyed adoration as a child, Carl's clumsy hugs at reunions. Had she judged them too harshly? But then she remembered the laughter, the casual cruelty of that word. Senile. It wasn't just about her. It was about every woman who'd been dismissed, underestimated, erased. She was fighting for them, too. By the end of the month, $9 million of her fortune was committed to causes she believed in. She kept the rest in reserve, not out of indecision, but because she wanted to keep building, keep learning. She started a journal, something she hadn't done since her 20s, filling it with thoughts about her legacy, her mistakes, her hopes. I'm not done yet, she wrote one night, her pen steady. There's still so much to do. She began to reconnect with old friends, people who'd known her before the money, before the family drama. Mrs. Callahan invited her to a book club, and Eleanor found herself laughing over wine and novels, feeling lighter than she had in years. She wasn't alone, she realized. She'd built a life rich with connections, even if her family couldn't see it. And she was writing a new chapter, one where she wasn't defined by their words, but by her own. The family reunion was inevitable. Margaret, ever the peacemaker when it suited her, organized it at her sprawling house in Cincinnati, framing it as a chance to clear the air. Eleanor debated declining, but something curiosity, perhaps, or a need for closure made her go. She drove the 2 hours alone, her Volvo humming along the highway, her mind replaying the past month. She wasn't nervous. Exactly. But there was a weight in her chest, a sense that this would be a turning point. The house was packed when she arrived. Cousins, nieces, nephews, and a few distant relatives she barely recognized. The air was thick with tension, conversations halting as she walked in. Margaret rushed over, her smile forced. Eleanor, I'm so glad you came, she said, her voice too bright. Eleanor nodded, her expression neutral. She wasn't here to play nice. Dinner was a strained affair, the clink of silverware louder than the chatter. Carl sat across from her, avoiding her gaze. Sarah kept glancing at her, eyes pleading. Finally, as dessert was served, Margaret stood, tapping her glass. We're family, she began, her voice trembling. We've had misunderstandings, but we can fix this. Eleanor, please, tell us what's going on. The room went silent. Eleanor set down her fork, her movements deliberate. She looked around, meeting each pair of eyes, some defiant, some guilty, some curious. You called me senile, she said, her voice clear and steady. You laughed at me, mocked me, reduced me to a joke on a screen. I've spent my life building something extraordinary, and you dismissed it. So I made a choice. My money, me work, is going to people who need it, who value it, not to you. Carl scoffed, unable to help himself. So you're punishing us? For a meme. Eleanor's eyes locked onto his. Not a punishment, Carl. A decision. I don't owe you anything. Sarah's voice broke in, soft and shaky. And Ellie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Eleanor held up a hand. I know you're sorry. Sarah. But sorry doesn't erase what was said. It doesn't change what you thought of me. The room erupted. Voices overlapping, anger from Carl, defensiveness from Margaret, tears from Sarah. Eleanor let them talk, her calm unshaken. She'd expected this, the chaos of wounded pride. But she also saw David in the corner, nodding quietly, and a few others who looked ashamed, their heads bowed. Not everyone was against her. Margaret tried to steer the conversation back to reconciliation. But Eleanor stood, her presence commanding. I'm not here to argue, she said. I came to tell you this. My legacy isn't yours to claim. It's mine to give. I've chosen to support women who've been overlooked, just like I was. You'll get your share $10,000 each. That's it. If you want more from me, earn it. Not with money, but with respect. She left the room, the silence behind her louder than any words. Outside, the night air was cool, and she breathed deeply, feeling free. She didn't need their approval, their love, or their guilt. She'd said what she needed to say. As she drove home, the stars bright above, she felt Thomas's presence, his quiet pride in her strength. The next morning, she woke to a text from Sarah. I want to understand you. Aunt Ellie. Can we start over? Eleanor stared at the screen, her heart softening. Maybe there was hope for some of them. But for now, she had worked to do meetings with nonprofits, plans for a new mentorship program. Her life was hers again, and she was just getting started. 6 months later, Eleanor's life was unrecognizable, yet deeply familiar. Her home was still her sanctuary, but now it buzzed with purpose. She'd turned her guest room into an office, where she met with nonprofit leaders and reviewed grant applications. Her donations had funded 50 scholarships, 3 women's shelters, and a mentorship program that paired young women with professionals in their fields. She'd even started speaking at local events, sharing her story, not the money, but the journey of a woman who'd refused to be defined by others' expectations. The family rift hadn't fully healed, but it was mending, slowly. Sarah visited one weekend, her eyes red from crying. I didn't see you, she admitted, sitting across from Eleanor at the kitchen table. Not really. Eleanor listened, her heart open but cautious. They talked for hours, not about money, but about life, Sarah's dreams, Eleanor's past. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a start. David became a regular visitor, bringing his dry humor and stories of his teaching days. Even Margaret reached out, her tone humbler, though Eleanor kept her at arm's length. The Facebook post that had started it all was a distant memory, but its impact lingered. Eleanor had deleted her account, not out of spite, but because she didn't need it. Her world was bigger now, filled with people who saw her for who she was. Aisha, the girl from the coding boot camp, sent her a letter, announcing she'd been accepted to MIT. You made this possible, she wrote. Eleanor framed the letter, hanging it beside Thomas's photo. It felt like a conversation with him, a shared victory. Her wealth was nearly gone, down to $1 million. But she didn't care. She'd kept enough to live comfortably, to travel if she wanted, to keep her Volvo running. The rest had become something great, a legacy of empowerment, of second chances. She thought of the women she'd helped, the lives she'd touched. It wasn't about the money. It was about the message. You are enough. You are capable. You are seen. One evening, as spring bloomed outside her window, Eleanor sat in her armchair, her journal open in her lap. She wrote, I was never senile. I was invisible to them, but not to myself. I've built something that will outlive me, something that matters. And I'm not done yet. She closed the journal, her heart steady. The world could call her what it wanted: old, eccentric, stubborn. She knew who she was, Eleanor Grayson. A woman who'd turned pain into power, who'd chosen purpose over resentment. She stepped outside, the air warm and fragrant with lilacs. Mrs. Callahan waved from her porch, and Eleanor waved back, smiling. The stars were just beginning to appear, faint against the twilight. She thought of Thomas, of Aisha, of the countless women her money would lift up. This was her story, and she'd written it on her terms. As she walked back inside, her steps light, she knew she'd never felt more alive.